In this video, I'll explain what's happening when we choose a life of solitude, why we do it, and the impact it can have on your life. You weren't always like this. Perhaps you were more sociable and loved gatherings with friends and family. But now you seek solitude and the peace that comes with it. There are moments in life when something changes quietly, not all at once, not in a way that draws attention, but somewhere within you, something begins to feel different. Welcome. Come on in, get comfy, and let's sit for a while. There's something I've been thinking about recently, something I've noticed, not just in others, but at times in myself too. The quiet decision to step away, not dramatically, not with confrontation, but slowly and with a kind of stillness that can be difficult to explain. Because this kind of distance rarely begins as distance. It usually begins with closeness, with care, with effort. You were the one who stayed, the one who listened, even when you didn't feel fully heard in return. The one who tried to understand even when things weren't explained clearly. The one who made space for others, even when your own space felt limited. And for a long time that felt natural. It felt like the right thing to do. To be there, to be reliable, to be someone others could lean on. And perhaps there was even a quiet sense of meaning in that. A feeling that being needed was a way of being connected. But over time, something begins to shift. Not in one clear moment, but in many small ones. A conversation that leaves you feeling slightly drained. A situation where you give more than you seem to receive. A moment where something is said that doesn't quite sit right, but you let it pass. And at first you might not think much of it. You might tell yourself, it's just a bad day. They didn't mean it. It's not worth making a big deal of. And so you continue as you always have. You show up, you listen, you make space. But those small moments don't disappear. They settle quietly just beneath the surface. And over time, they begin to accumulate. And then, gradually, there's a feeling, not sharp, not overwhelming, but persistent. A sense that something is slightly out of balance. That something feels a little heavier than it used to. And you might not be able to explain it clearly. If this is resonating with you, please click the like button so I know I'm not just talking to myself. You might not have the words for it, but you feel it in the way you hesitate before replying, in the way certain conversations feel more effortful, in the way you begin to need a little more space, without fully knowing why. And often before anything changes, there's a period where you try to hold things as they are. You try to adjust, to be more understanding, to be more patient. You tell yourself, maybe I just need to approach this differently. Maybe I'm overthinking it. And so you keep going. But something within you is beginning to recognise a truth, even if you're not ready to fully see it yet. And then, at some point, without a clear beginning, something becomes harder to ignore. A quiet realisation begins to form that the way things are is no longer working in the same way. Not necessarily because anyone is wrong, but because something within you has changed. Your awareness, your energy, your capacity. And with that comes a kind of tiredness, not just physical, but emotional. The kind that comes from giving for longer than you should have. And so without making a decision all at once, you begin to step back. Gently. You take a little longer to respond. You don't reach out as often. You allow yourself small moments of space, and at first it might feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, because it's not how you've been. But then something else appears, something you didn't quite expect, a sense of relief. And that feeling can be confusing, because you might think, shouldn't I feel guilty? Shouldn't this feel like a loss? But instead, it feels quieter, lighter, like something has eased just a little. And that's often the moment when something becomes clear, that this isn't about pushing people away. It's about something else, something deeper, because this is often where the shift begins, but not where it's fully understood. When something begins to shift within us, it doesn't always come with clarity. There isn't always a moment where everything suddenly makes sense. More often, it's something we feel before we fully understand it. In that space where you've begun to step back, where things have become a little quieter, something starts to reveal itself, not loudly, not all at once, but gradually through the way you begin to feel. Because what often stands out most isn't the distance itself, it's the relief that comes with it. The way your thoughts feel a little calmer, the way your body feels a little less tense, the way you no longer feel quite as pulled into things that used to take so much of your energy. And that can feel confusing, because we're often taught that distance should feel like loss, that stepping away should feel heavy or filled with regret. But when it feels like relief, it gently asks a different question. What was it that you were holding that you didn't realize had become so heavy? Because over time, without us always noticing, our mind and body begin to adapt to patterns, to expectations, to the emotional environments we spend time in. And if something feels unpredictable or unbalanced, we begin to adjust ourselves around it. We become more aware, more careful, more attentive to subtle changes, trying, often without realizing it, to keep things steady, to avoid tension, to maintain connection. And while that might work for a while, it comes at a cost. Because constantly adjusting yourself requires energy. Being the one who notices everything, who manages the atmosphere, who keeps things from tipping too far in one direction, can be quite exhausting, even if no one else sees it. Even if you've done it for so long, it feels normal. And over time, that kind of awareness can begin to feel like a weight. And this is where something important begins to happen. Not as a conscious decision, but as a response. Your mind and body begin to look for ways to protect you. Not in a dramatic way, but in small shifts. A little less engagement, a little more distance. A quiet pulling back from what feels overwhelming. And often, this isn't about rejecting others. It's about restoring balance within yourself. From the outside, this can sometimes be misunderstood. It might look like withdrawal, like disinterest, like something has changed suddenly. But from the inside, it feels very different. It feels like finally having a little room to breathe, like stepping out of something that was taking more than it gave. And in that space, there's often a quiet sense of clarity. And this is where an important distinction begins to appear. Because stepping away can look like building walls. But it isn't always that. Walls are about shutting everything out. But what's happening here is something more intentional. A boundary. A way of recognising what you can and cannot continue to hold. And choosing, even if gently, to no longer carry more than is yours. And perhaps this is why it feels different than before. Because you're no longer responding in the same way. You're no longer stretching yourself to maintain something that feels unbalanced. You're beginning to listen to something within you that has been quiet for a long time. And that voice doesn't ask for conflict. It doesn't demand explanation. It simply asks for space. And in that space, something shifts. From reacting to becoming aware. From trying to hold everything together to noticing what's actually happening. And that awareness changes how you respond. Not all at once, but steadily. Because when distance feels like relief, it's often not the distance itself that matters. It's what that distance reveals. What it shows you about what you've been carrying, about what you've been tolerating, about what you may no longer need to hold in the same way. And perhaps that's where the real understanding begins. When something begins to make sense, it rarely arrives as a clear conclusion. It's not always a moment where everything is decided. More often, it's a quiet knowing. Something that settles within you gradually until it feels true. Because when we think about stepping away, it can sound final, like something has ended, like something has been cut off. But when you sit with it more closely, it often isn't about ending something completely. It's about changing your relationship to it, the way you show up, the way you engage, the way you allow it to affect you. And sometimes that change includes distance, not as rejection, but as recognition. Because at the heart of this, there's something very simple. A recognition of what you need, not what you've been used to giving, not what's expected, but what actually supports you. And for many people, this is not something that comes easily, especially if you've spent a long time being the one who adapts, the one who makes things work, the one who carries more so that others don't have to. But there comes a point when something shifts, not in a dramatic way, but in a quieter one, where continuing in the same way no longer feels possible. Not because you don't care, but because you do. Because you've begun to recognise that caring for others doesn't have to come at the cost of yourself. And in that recognition, something else begins to unfold. The understanding that not everything is yours to carry. Not every emotion, not every expectation, not every dynamic. And that letting go is not the same as giving up. It's choosing to no longer take responsibility for what was never fully yours. And yet, even when this becomes clear, there can still be a feeling that lingers. A quiet guilt, a question. Should I be doing more? Should I have handled this differently? Because stepping back can feel unfamiliar, especially if you've spent a long time stepping forward. But perhaps that feeling isn't a sign that something is wrong. Perhaps it's simply a sign that something is new. And sitting with this it becomes clear that this kind of decision requires its own kind of strength. Not loud, not visible, but steady. The strength to listen to yourself. The strength to respond even when it feels uncertain. The strength to choose what supports you, even if it changes how others see you. Because this isn't about becoming closed. It's not about pushing everyone away. It's about becoming more aware of where your energy goes, where your presence is received, where your care is returned, and allowing yourself to move towards those places more fully. And in doing that, something begins to rebalance. Not perfectly, not immediately, but gradually your energy feels different. Your time feels different. And perhaps your relationships begin to feel different too. More mutual, more steady, more aligned with who you are now. Because in the end, walking away is rarely about other people. It's about yourself. Not in a selfish way, but in an honest one. A recognition that your well-being matters, that your energy matters, that your presence is something worth protecting. And perhaps there's something in this for all of us. Not as something we need to act on immediately, but as something to notice. The moments where we feel stretched, the moments where something feels unbalanced, the moments where a small step back might create a little more space. This kind of change is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself, but it matters. It's not about isolating yourself completely or being lonely. It's about the need for solitude. Because sometimes walking away isn't about losing something. It's about finding your way back to yourself. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a moment where stepping back felt like the right thing to do? If this kind of video resonates with you, there are more on my channel. So please feel free to subscribe so you don't miss more thought-provoking topics. Thank you for sharing your time with me today. Take gentle care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.